Hello friends, Anthony here at the Periodic Table of History. I'm glad you could make it. We look at history in 4 dimensions using the Periodic Table of History, and we use our time machine to go back through history and find some of the subtle things that happen throughout history we may not know even anything about. We place the kings or characters in time and place. And of course we're going to go back behind the flood, and so we don't really know about the geography there. The geography can be as foreign as anything in our imaginations could ever think about. And we have to think about that our present understanding is not the key to the past when we get back behind the flood. But let's go on this journey. We're going to talk about Enos, and he is the grandchild of Adam. Enos and the birth of prayer. The Bible story you probably have never heard of. And that's because we really don't have very much on this character. But we're going to go through what we do have and some of the fascinating things we can find in the Periodic Table of History and the chart itself. And so we have little more than a name and a date for Enos. And our journey starts in Genesis 4:26, talking about, "And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord." And right there's that Bible passage that we probably haven't heard very much about. Then began men to call on the name of the Lord. So this is possibly the birth of prayer, as Genesis is the book of beginnings. Very fascinating idea right there. Other ideas say it's the opposite of that, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go with just what I see right here. Very interesting. And then let's look into the chart itself. Here we have it. I'm going to click around the area I'm going to be looking at. Here, that's really good. We're going to go here to what I think of as the Middle East, even though this is in a geography that might as well be Mars to us, because we don't know anything about the history. But I still think of Israel being in the Middle East. And then I think, I just put the pre-flood world over here. But we're looking in this region of the map. So let's zoom up just slightly to that, give us a better understanding of what's going on. There is Adam, and we've gone through Seth, and now we're down here at Enos. And in some places it's called Enosh, with a very large lifespan. We can see a couple scriptures about that in the Masoretic text. And maybe I can give this a different color just so we can see it a little bit better. See, there's the yellow bar in the midst of all those blue bars. And I can put it out here so that my large arrow can see it. You can see that Adam, that first bar there, is going very long along all these generations. And Enos is that yellow one. So he knew Noah right here. Noah is this blue arrow. Enos knew Noah. That is quite amazing. And some other things I wanted to check out in this video is to think about the Sumerian kings list. That is right over here. It talks about a flood as well. And so I'm going to put a little arrow over that Sumerian kings list coming up here in the region of Sumer or Iraq, Babylon-ish area. Those Akkadian cities, talking about here. And then let's move on and see what we can find out. And Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. So there's that little bit of scripture that we just have a few allusions to. His very large age, 905 years. And why don't we just zoom in so that he is magnified. There we go. We have another chronology in 1 Chronicles 1 and Luke 3 that repeat this same genealogy that you can take a look at there. Now, other traditions are from the book of Jubilees, about approximately 150 BC. And we have Josephus, he was writing about 90 AD. And then we have the Ethiopic Ge'ez Chronicles that talk just a little bit to reiterate the name of Enos. And that was written probably 500 AD. Now, the only interesting thing I think we get from these references is we have the wife of Enos is Noham, and seeing some of those pseudo references to names is a little bit interesting for the people that want to learn a little bit about these characters that we really don't know a lot about. Book of Jubilees, chapter 4:13 talks about that, and I throw that reference up there so that you can read it and become enhanced. Now, another interesting thing is we have the Septuagint. It has a different date for Seth being 205 years old instead of 105 years old. And this is one of the problems with the chronologies, that some Bible scholars use the Masoretic text like I do, and some use the Septuagint. So based on the Septuagint, Adam was around about 4004 BC, but then I have Adam at 4114 using the Masoretic text. So we can see that slight difference in these numbers, and so there's different methodologies of different people using these ancient texts that come to different numbers. Now, so we don't base our salvation on these dates that we come across. What we do is look into the past, get the best understanding that we can, and then the road of the Torah talks about Messiah who has come in the person of Jesus Christ, and we put our trust in him. So that is the take-home path of everything. It's probably why Paul said, don't worry so much about endless genealogies, because we always run into these different number differences or something. But don't base your salvation on those differences in numbers, like the Septuagint versus the Masoretic text. The time before the flood is irrelevant to anything tangible, what we can do now. The world that we see now is completely different than that pre-flood world. And so if the timeline is stretched 100 years this way or that way, because Adam is 4004 BC or 4114 BC, don't let that bother you at all. So let us talk about the timeline a little bit. The Babylonians have this Eridu Genesis. I told you we were going to talk about that. So I want to zoom up to that into the timeline. See, we're moving over right here to the Sumerian kings list. There I show it. We have a couple kings here. Let me find an arrow that we can work with here. One that isn't so big that we can't see anything. Okay, we have two people here, Alulim and Alelgar. If we want to back up and go to the next person that could be applicable, then we have Enmenlu Ana. And those are kind of interesting. We don't hear about very much, but the Sumerian kings list talks about a flood that happened after 9 pre-flood kings reigned in the pre-flood earth. So that is a separate, completely Babylonian. It gets into the other gods and things as well, so it's not a place for all of us to be, definitely. But it is interesting to see that the Babylonians thought that there was a flood, and they had the names of some of the kings before the flood. So then we can go to the name Enos. It means mortal man. And when we go to that Sumerian Babylonian kings list, the word Enmenluana means mortal man or mankind also. So those are a bunch of interesting parallels there. So there's not a lot of tidbits there. There are the names, and there are the text boxes that hold those timelines in place. And then finally, there's a picture of the Sumerian kings list where we're getting these. You've heard the expression, is it written in stone? Well, these things have been written in stone. It's kind of fun. And for other controversies, there are Jewish mystical books of 400 AD. They talk about this beginning of prayer as beginning of the opposite of prayer. It's kind of a confusing thing, but there are teachings there in the Targum, Onkelos, and then the writings of the Mishnah, Torah, Maimonides. These writings talk about Enos this time when people began to call upon the Lord as the time when they were actually becoming idolatrous. Now, I trust this less because these are people in 400 AD writing about a time that's 4,000 years before that time, and just extrapolating interpretations into that. So I'm going to go with the original idea, the first thing I see when Seth brought forth Enos, and there was a time when people began to call upon the name of the Lord, the birth of prayer. Another interesting thing is Josephus talks about Enos. It's in his text in book 1, 3, 4, and that's of the Antiquities. And then there's a really fun paragraph that he talks about, Josephus, about the long lives. Let's look at those 905-year lives. It's something that really bothers us when we're looking at it. So I'm going to put this text box up here so that you can read that, and that can give you an idea about the writing style of Josephus and a whole bunch of the references that he puts up there. He's referencing, remember he's writing in about 90 AD, and he's referencing a bunch of the writers of his time that are talking about ancient ones who lived long lives. And he says, Hieronymus, and he even mentions Hesiod there. Isn't that fun? And Hellenatius and Berosus, a lot of these different names that we have a hard time pronouncing, but some of these books are still alive, and or some of these books are still extant. Some of them are not. But it's fun to see how Josephus references other people who are talking about the same phenomena of these really large lives. So, a few curiosities there, a little bit of information about Enos that we may not have expected, and I hope that whets your curiosity and gets you into studying the Bible. It is really an interesting journey, and when we can learn from the past, we can enhance our lives now and in the future. So you can check out these other videos or click on the channel name and find some other videos in this channel. Have a great week, and thanks for being here. Talk to you in the next video.